welcome to CBMC Barrie, Central Ontario's opportunity to encourage and inspire you as you explore your faith and walk in Jesus Christ. I'm excited to share with you today a story with my friend Jim Fraser. Now I have to tell you, Jim and I go a little ways back when I had the opportunity to be a youth pastor in the region. And Jim at that point was one of the teachers at Innisdale Secondary School. We forged a really cool partnership, getting to work together in the high school and with the community. And so from that time on, Jim and I's heart were just knit together. And so today I get the opportunity to let Jim tell his side of what God is doing in and through him. Stay tuned, because I think you're going to really be excited to hear the mission that God has brought him along.
I'm going to attempt to answer two questions. My first question that I'm going to deal with is how I came to Christ and the key elements in my personal walk. The second question is how Christ has impacted my vocation and my various careers, and most recently in retirement. From John 12:26, whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant will also be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. My parents at 10 years old in 1963 chose to send me to Pioneer Camp. I was 10. And it was a great decision because church I hadn't bought in, I hadn't bought out. It just was not real to me. But the gospel presentation that I responded to made everything come to life. I bought in. I heard the gospel. They introduced daily quiet times, which were non-existent in our household. We prayed, we went to church. They were loving, godly parents. I believe they were in the kingdom. And the way my mother's faith progressed after from my father's death was just a testament to that. But anyway, small group Bible studies I learned about at Pioneer, robust singing at boys camp, testimonies, godly men and women worshiping outside in nature at Chapel Point. Yet, it is a daily reflection on the gospel to this date that is changing me. And what is that gospel? The gospel is we are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dared to believe, yet we at the same time are more loved and accepted in Christ than we ever hoped. That definition was by Tim Keller. The first part keeps us humble because we're sinful and flawed in ourselves, and the other part, we're so loved and accepted by Jesus Christ. That gives us such confidence in the gospel. The gospel is like a Coke machine. Sometimes you put money in and the Coke doesn't drop. You must bang that definition of the gospel, that we're so sinful in ourselves, yet we're so loved, so that the gospel daily transforms your life by the amazing love that God gives us. So have the Coke can drop in your life and reflect on the gospel daily. Every day it's a recommitment, I think, to the gospel. Let me just plug Tim Keller here. Tim Keller has a gospel podcast that I listen to because I find it so inspiring. He's also got on YouTube, if you go to Tim Keller Marriage, he wrote a book with his wife Kathy on the meaning of marriage. And there's 13 podcasts on Tim Keller, on marriage, under Tim Keller Marriage. And it's transformation when Google asks a Presbyterian minister to speak to Google staff for 40 minutes on Christian marriage and then answer questions from Google staff for 20 minutes. That's transformational. Then Google West Coast asked him to fly out to speak to the West Coast staff on his new book, Reasons for God, on apologetics. So another 40 minutes by a Presbyterian minister to Google staff, questions and answers. He's not answering questions from church type people, but he's taking questions from Google staff. These are Google Author Talks, all available online. In 1966, my dad died from a massive heart attack at 45 years old when the doctors was in the room. He had just been promoted to police inspector, the youngest in Toronto, at 40 years old. He bought a boat, bought a cottage, bought a new car. We never saw a new car until 1965, but we had the money. He bought it. My parents lived simply, stayed in their house. Yet it was a traumatic shock when my father went like that when the doctor's in the room. I saw it happen. Yet God had his helpers ready. My family, my 2 brothers, my grandmother, extended family, wonderful aunts and uncles, and the police force, and Pioneer Camp again. I learned from my mother and from other people, when something traumatic happens like that, you have 2 choices, and it played out in my family. You could either be grateful, I could either be grateful for the wonderful 13 years that my father was a wonderful Christian father, or I could get bitter. God's not fair, God's unjust. I chose to be thankful for the 13 years. My mother did too. She said, I don't know why it happened, and we all miss that, but is God not allowed to do with what he wants, with what is his own? I was grateful to the general director at Pioneer Camp, who became my surrogate father, Vincent Craven. I returned to camp every year from 10 years old for many years, and I learned about InterVarsity and John Stott and Urbana. So I went off to university. What's my first step on registration day? Go to InterVarsity cell group on Thursday nights in the Arts Building. I also found my vocational passion at Pioneer Camp because people were having fun in the kitchen, and my Presbyterian parents said, we'll pay for 2 weeks. You want to stay there longer? You got to get a job working in the kitchen or maintenance. I definitely wasn't the maintenance type, so into the kitchen I went, and I found the love of food and organization, what was my thing, and I said, here's something that's practical. I could take at university, 4 years of hospitality and tourism, there I went. Then I went to Knox College because I had a feeling, I had a belief, okay, I just studied business for 4 years. Surely I can study God's word for a year or 2 to have a theological base for my future career, which I wanted to be in Christian camping in the food area, because 28% of the budget of a camp's operational revenue is food. So off I went to University of Guelph. But in 1980, when I was at Knox College, I met my wonderful wife. She was at Pioneer Camp, serving at International Christmas, and so was I. She was a staff worker from Ottawa. We married in '82 and have 2 wonderful kids. My daughter is a CPA controller at Tyndale, while my son works in medical software. Let me just bring this point about John Stott, because in 1978, through an InterVarsity conference, it's crystal clear in my mind. He came to Toronto, Pursuit 78. He said, it was on vocation. He says, we tend to put our emphasis as men or as people on what we do. Are we doctors, teachers, tradespeople, whatever, what we do for a living? He said, far more important than what we do is who we're called to be in Jesus Christ. And he said it's like a multifaceted diamond. I can hear these words echoing in my mind to this day. What are we called to do? And he outlined for half an hour, which I won't do today. He said we're called to holiness. Well, what's that mean, holiness? Holiness means Christ-likeness. That's a simple way of understanding it. We're called to fellowship. On Sundays, we're called to fellowship of God's people, or through small groups. We're called to serve. We're called to suffer. We're called to glory. Jesus Christ suffered, so we should expect to suffer too. Anyway, he said it's a multifaceted diamond, our call to what we're called to be. And that's just been so helpful to keep that in my mind. Romans 12:1. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord and praying. I've had 3 basic careers in hospitality and tourism. 14 years with a wonderful family in Muskoka, a family firm, and I survived that, and it was wonderful. The owner was like a surrogate father again. I never heard him tell a lousy off-color joke. He was honest, he was hardworking, he was totally family, totally work, and he was a great man to work with. I enjoyed it. It was enjoyable going to work every day. I saw the company grow from 800,000 up to 14 million. And that was from 74 to 89 when I left. I had 3 successful years as an entrepreneur, feeding 50,000 meals on Lake Muskoka. Then I had 25 years teaching hospitality and tourism. So it's all in the hospitality and tourism area, and I was just so blessed. as a teacher, I was involved in the business world, finding jobs for students and have my students operate a catering business. It was a dream job. I had my students do projects, do catering banquets. They were student-led, student-managed. They would do the accounting, marketing. They would do the customer response for it. They would analyze the response form. They would do all those different aspects. And I was the person directing it, but they would actually do the work. And they came after school and stayed. Some of my days were from 5:45. I'd be there when the caretakers arrived at 5:30, from 5:45 to 9 o'clock. But I loved it. Sometimes I'd forget to eat, making sure my guests had eaten, my students had eaten, and I'd go home. Hey, you know, I never found time to eat. But anyway, it was a blast because I got students actively engaged from day one. I got them excited about hospitality. They got fed. They knew the drill. If they said, Mr. Fraser, what do you got to eat? I said, work first, then eat. I'm not your personal chef. But they knew if they worked, they'd get fed. So we made about $10,000 a year. We could take kids, the lower socioeconomic kids, to Wonderland, to Mandarin, but I never gave them a ticket. I said, okay, you work 2 banquets, you work 3 banquets, or work 5 hours at lunch hour, and you will earn your right to go. So I retired. I was getting older, and I said, I've had a great career. It's time to let other people come in, and let's leave on a high note. So I left. Then the depression hit because I started supply teaching. I said, oh, it's not bad, but it's not at the classroom. It can't be. But anyway, the point was, after praying and thinking, God changed my perspective. I've had 43 years of vocational work. I've enjoyed them all, except for 1 year when I had 6 subjects in 6 different rooms I'd never taught before. I was depressed all that year, but it had nothing to do with me or the students. It had to do with my competence on teaching 6 new subjects, all throwing me all at the same time and not in one classroom. I was like a yo-yo going around the school. The point is, God changed my perspective and my heart, and I became an elder at my church, and I now saw my new classroom as my ward district, the worship committee, being engaged in the life of the church. But I also, I saw joy. God's blessed you with 43 years of work. Enjoy your retirement. Be filled with gratitude. Start serving the poor. I've got different ideas of how I can serve the poor in Barrie, and I'm working on that. And life is full of excitement because now I've got the time by embracing my retirement, by spending more time with family, in my home, travel, hockey 3 times a week in a seniors league. I was playing hockey in my church league with 24-year-olds and I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I said, it's time to leave this league, and I found a seniors league, and it's like I'm a kid again with these 60 to 75-year-olds. So anyway, hockey, reading, grandson, motorcycle riding, my 1150 BMW, reaching out to the poor, and I'm coming up with ways of just buying them a Big Mac and a coffee and say, would you like this hamburger? Would you mind telling me your story if you'd like? You know, I like to hear their story, spending time with them. Taking a garbage bag and offering them $20 if they pick up garbage with me for the next hour. Anyway, I got ideas like that, and some respond, some don't. And my pastoral visiting. There's so much to do. Let me just talk a bit about my wife, who I met at Pioneer Camp. 34 wonderful years. I was deeply in love with her, but it was the longest goodbye for 6 years. Lewy body dementia and frontal lobe dementia are not fun. I could tell you a story when there's either Syrian terrorists in the basement or a congregation of Messianic Jews. All of a sudden I get a phone call, come home, your wife's phone 911, and they think she's reported Syrian terrorists with a bomb in the basement. And the bomb squad from Barrie's here, and the fire truck and the ambulance are outside your door, but they're afraid to go in because she's playing the piano. But it was the disease. The neighbor says, don't be afraid, go in, she's delusional. So the point was, God was with me through all that. The neighbors, my local church, my kids living in Toronto, my school, my fellow teachers. I could call them at a drop of a hat. hey, I've got to go home, the police are there. Or my wife's, anyway, I got to go home, my wife's got the police at the door because she's phoned 911 again. So all of a sudden I just disconnected the phone because when she got delusional, I had to take a phone away. But different, the VON, their daycare program, RVH, their psychiatric unit, Dr. Mulder there, Sunnybrook, psychiatric unit there, and neurology, Homewood, Penetanguishene. I am so thankful to our healthcare system. There was no solution to this. All I could do was make her safe and comfortable. I want to thank Trevor Owen for introducing me to a wonderful woman of God from Emmanuel Baptist Church. And life goes on serving with my gifts and talents and my resources in retirement. I just want to give you that gospel quote again, because at Pioneer Camp, I responded as much as I responded, and the gospel became real to me at 10 years old. It wasn't just my mother's religion or father's religion. It was my personal commitment to it because I heard. But but this definition from Tim Keller helps me, because I was saved then, but I am being saved and I shall be saved. And the more I reflect on the gospel, on the Keller's definition of the gospel, the more real it becomes. Let me read that definition once more if you got your pens and papers out. We are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dare believe, yet at the same time, we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hoped. So the first part keeps us humble. The second part makes us feel loved and adored. And that's the balance that I reflect on as I get up and start a new day. I want to leave you with a challenge today. At the beginning of my lecture, I talked about John Stott and his conference on pursuit. And he talked about where do we put our emphasis, on what we do or who we're called to be in Jesus Christ. And I know I have to face that daily. Well, it's easier now in retirement because I'm no longer a teacher, but I'm so thankful for my past career. So that was a great relief that after 43 years I've earned my retirement. I'm grateful for the past. Instead of grieving the past, I'm grateful. So I've changed from grief to gratitude. And I just want to say, am I growing in by serving, by fellowship, by suffering, by identifying with the poor? How can I think of creative ways to identify and serve the poor? That's a complex question, but I could work with one at a time and just befriend them and just show them Christ's love. So I want to just leave you with the challenge. Our hearts, Calvin says, our hearts are idol makers. Just when you think, oh no, that's not an idol, another one will pop up. So make sure that we see our identity as sons of the King or daughters of the King as our first identity, and then called to what we're called to be rather than what we're called to do. Yes, work is important. I'll leave you this one. You've probably heard this story. There's three people working in a stone quarry. The first he was asked, what are you doing? Oh, I'm hewing stone. Can't you see what I'm doing? The second person, what are you doing? I'm earning money for my family. That's what I'm doing. I've got a quarry business. I've got to get so much rock out. And the last person says, I am building a cathedral to the glory of God. We must see our lives as making society more and more pleasing to God.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing your story. Wow, how insightful. You know, to hear some of the things that you had to walk through and go through. Today, I'd like you to think about, you know, what does it look like when you have to completely change direction and the people that are around you are changing? You know, that's kind of been a common theme that we've been seeing throughout this online series. And Jim was at a spot where he had to reconsider, what does life look like now that things are so different? So join us now in a few minutes as we take a bit of time to hear your questions and dialogue together. It's an opportunity for us to network online. The link for how to connect will be on the screen, or you can go to cbmcbarrie.com.